أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وأسأل صلوات الله وتسليماته على سيدنا ومولانا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أزواجه أمهات المؤمنين. ثم أما بعد، مرحبا بكم في هذا اللقاء، وهو اللقاء الأول ربما في التابع تحت مظلة لجنة الشباب، شباب وفتيات. وأسأل الله جل وعلا أن يبارك في جهود الإخوة القائمين على هذا العمل. هناك عدد من الإخوة والأخوات هم المسؤولون عن هذا ترتيبا وتنظيما وإعدادا. يمكن ما حدش منهم قاعد على المنصة، لكن هي طبيعة العمل أن يكون هناك جنود مجهولون. أسأل الله جل وعلا في البداية أن يبارك في الجميع إن شاء الله تعالى. وبدون مقدمة طويلة، الموضوع اللي معنا موضوع مهم جدا للغاية، ويسعدنا أن يكون معنا في هذا اللقاء الأخ الحبيب الأستاذ شريف أحمد. والأخ شريف يعلم الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يحبه في الله. مش عايز أكبره وأقول ده هو كبير، لكن أنا أعتبره في مرحلة الشباب، ما زال في مرحلة الشباب. ويظل الشباب أحيانا عند بعض الناس يقولوا هو لحد ال40. كنت ال40 يس، لكن في بعض الأوقات يقولون إن الشباب يستمر مع الإنسان ما دام معطاء، ممكن يقعد كده لحد ال70 وال80. فإن شاء الله عز وجل هو شباب إلى أن يشاء الله تعالى. الموضوع اللي معنا هو تحت عنوان هويتنا وكيف نحافظ عليها. هويتنا، هوية إسلامية، إزاي نحافظ على الهوية. أتمنى إني مش عارف، مش شايف حد معاه ورقة ولا قلم خالص، فاللي معهوش ورقة وقلم على الأقل معاه تليفون، بس أخشى إن يطلع التليفون الناس تكتب عليها ملاحظات فكون في دنيا وإحنا في دنيا تانية. أخشى هذا إن يكون الورق. هنحاول نشوف لكم بعض أوراق وبعض أقلام الآن دلوقتي. لو تشوفوا لنا أوراق، لأن الأوراق تقريبا في المدرسة والمدرسة مغلقة، ما أعرفش الأخوات اللي بتوع الكشافة، هل عندكم أوراق أو أقلام في المكتب بتاعكم؟ لو لقيتوا اكتبوا لنا إن شاء الله. أوراق وأقلام ممكن؟ الله يبارك فيك. طيب هنبدأ الآن دلوقتي معانا الجزء الأول مع الأستاذ شريف. الأستاذ شريف هيبدأ، وبعد كده سأثني بعده إن شاء الله تعالى، ويكون في حوار مفتوح بيننا وبينكم. أتمنى من الله سبحانه وتعالى أن تكون هناك روح لاستعداد لهذا الموضوع المهم، وأسأل الله جل وعلا أن ينفع بالجميع وأن يبارك في الجميع. مع أخونا الأستاذ شريف، تفضل مشكور.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. It gives me great pleasure to share podium microphone with my teacher, Dr. Akram, someone that I truly learned a lot from in this past short period of time, in the past couple of years. So I'm very honored and very happy to be here with you, alhamdulillah, tonight. I'm always very excited to come here to see all these guys and girls. MashaAllah, all of you have grown this past couple of years. Some of you I can't even recognize. So you guys are causing a lot of trouble. You're keeping your parents up at night. Everyone is worried. As soon as I walked in, they said these kids are very difficult to figure out. We have no idea what's up with them. Everyone has their own mind. Everyone has different ideas. Everyone is difficult to kind of like, they're growing so fast. And we don't know what to do with them. And that is the nature of life. That is what you guys are going to experience this all the time. Amazing change that you're going to come across throughout your journey of life. You're going to experience ups and downs, and you're going to experience exciting times and not so exciting times. But the point being, or the topic for tonight, is the issue of identity. The issue of who am I? And what am I here to do? That is a question that everyone asks themselves. Everyone should ask themselves. Everyone should struggle to find an answer to these two questions at least. And everyone should be at least concerned if they cannot find answers to some of these questions. Because that is the calling of anyone, Muslims or not, any human being. That is what you wonder about, and that's what you challenge yourself with. So let me start by this. if I were to ask you, who are you? The very first answer that comes to your mind, the very first idea that crosses your head, the very first thought that pretty much, without you struggling, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Yes?
Just say your name.
Exactly. It's, I introduce myself by giving my name. Maybe if I'm in school, I would say something else like, in school, my grade? Perhaps, right? Something like that. What else? How would you introduce yourself? The what? Religion. So you say, I'm Muslim. That's a good answer. That's another answer. What else? Yes. Nationality, right? My roots, my folks, my family, where I come from, my parents. My parents have, they have a lot to do with who I am right now. What else? Guys, what else? How would you define yourself? Not necessarily, but how would you introduce yourself? How would you, tell people who you are? Casually, right? Nothing that you have to think very hard or very much about. Yes? Your personality. Hey, I like this. I am the kind of person that if I don't know the answer to a question, I tell you I don't know the answer to the question. But I know how to find the answer. That's who I am. That's my personality. You introduce yourself. Okay. Yes, what else?
Or I can just tell you I don't know, and that purpose of life is self-discovery.
And what a great, that sounds really awesome. What a great answer. That I'm undecided. I'm really wearing so many hats, and I play so many roles, and I haven't figured out exactly in this young age, or whatever, the 16, 17, 18, whatever, I haven't figured it out yet. And that's honest, and that's truthful, and that's okay, right? But people like, and Sheikh Akram is going to pick on you guys tonight. He's not going to let you off the hook, man. You better say something. Otherwise, there's no dinner. So, one more question here. Any hands? How would you introduce yourself? Any takers? That's fine. So, as a human being, as a Muslim, as a student, the different roles, or maybe I don't know, I haven't figured it out yet. And that's good, but let's start with the first thing. At the very beginning, at the very least, at the very basic surface level, you are a human being. And that comes with expectations. That comes with at least a basic understanding. Not that you breathe and you need food and you can talk, and not that kind of human being. Human being meaning that you have something beyond the physical experience that you see here. Beyond what you can touch, and what you can see, and what you can feel, and what you can smell. There is something beyond that. If you say you're a human being, you're different because there is something that distinguishes you. There is something that makes you different. Yes or no? And what is it? Yes? Your conscience. Okay, that's good. That's good. What is the, maybe, not necessarily religious, but what else? What do people call it? Muslims and non-Muslims. What defines you? Exactly what you said. Maybe the Quranic term is, and here we're going to talk about, identity, generally speaking, and we're going to talk about identity from an Islamic perspective too. Yes? Okay, so the Quranic expression is, what distinguishes you, Walid, from any other creation is that Allah has given you a soul. Allah has given you something that is different than the rest of the creation. And that soul has a calling. That soul, is the thing that irks you, late at night and makes you question things and makes you think about things different than everybody else, different than the rest of the creations. Obviously, the rest of the creations are not concerned with a number of things you as a human being will be concerned about. Can I have some examples? What are your concerns? What is the thing that bothers you? What is the thing that would make you angry, would make you upset, or make you happy? Give me some examples. Something that maybe, again, don't struggle for ideas. The very first thing that crosses your mind. Yes? Huh? Your grades, you want to excel in life. You want to be someone. You want to do well in school. You want to do something, you want to achieve something. That is, other creations, they just live to eat and drink and do whatever else, and that's it. But you, there is a higher calling. There is a larger purpose. There is a need to justify. Is this thing too loud? It's good? Okay. There is a need to justify my existence. Why am I here? What's my contribution to this existence here, to this life, to this country, to my people? What is it that I'm here to do? Yes or no? Does that make sense? Okay, maybe the best thing that could describe this idea is those who are not aware of the purpose of their existence. The very famous story, anyone heard the story of the lamb or the sheep and the tiger? The tiger and the lamb. The sheep or the lion. Different stories, different cultures, different languages, even in Spanish and in Russian, we have the same story. And it's a funny story, but it's a very profound story and a very important story because it really tells a person, in this case, it tells this animal who they really should be. So this tiger was born in the wilderness, okay? And the tiger pretty much was abandoned by, the parents. Pretty much like many of these kids, unfortunately, become abandoned, and some of them, they have a single parent, and some of them, they have different difficult circumstances. SubhanAllah. This tiger was abandoned in the middle of the wilderness and was only picked up by a flock of sheep. And they picked him up, and the tiger started roaming with them, started grazing with them, started doing what the average sheep would do. And one day, another tiger saw the flock of sheep, and he was very, very hungry. So, wanted to bounce on one of these sheep and have it for lunch. And they started fleeing, they started running. There was a bird, and in the midst of all this, he noticed this big, humongous tiger, just like him. And he was fleeing like the rest of them. And it's a very interesting phenomenon, this very interesting idea. Why is this guy fleeing from me? I'm like him, he's like me. Why he's scared of me? And he started questioning why this is happening. He started realizing that this tiger is acting exactly like the sheep. He's running like them, he's fearful like them, displays everything that they display, the same exact ideas. So he dragged him from the flock and took him to the river and shook him because he was so scared. Shook him to open his eyes, and he told him, look in the water, look in the well, look in this river, and see who you really are. And the tiger at first, the sheep tiger, was very scared to open his eyes. But he shook him hard enough to convince him to open his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he found that he looks like a tiger. He looks like this other tiger. They both look the same. He's not a sheep. And he started acting like one. This, as simple as this story sounds, but it's a very important idea. That some people go through life without realizing who they really are. What a very sad existence. What a very sad reality. If you go through life without justifying, without understanding, without explaining to yourself first and to everybody else who you really are, why you were created. And we have a very interesting idea in the Quran that says we are spiritual beings going through a physical experience. The Quran talks about this all the time. That we are, first and foremost, we're souls. Before creation, in the very beginning, in the angelic realm, in the presence of Allah, way before this whole earth existed, we were souls. We were not physical, flesh and blood that you can touch and feel. And that's a very important idea. Because many people go through life thinking that they have to eat and drink, and that's all they have to do, and they have to spend money. Oh, check her out, she got the S8 phone, and she got the iPad, she got this thing, and she got the other thing. Oh, look at what she's riding and what she's wearing and how expensive this thing she has, and look at her phone and look at all this materialistic stuff that at one point you're going to say goodbye to and you're going to leave behind. All of us are going to leave everything behind. And all of us are not going to pay much attention to many of these things that people fight over. And all of us at one point or another are going to think very little of ourselves. I can't believe I was so upset because of this iPhone or because of this thing or another thing. Because what really matters is what I'm going to add to this life. So far, are you following? Any comments, Doctor? Good, continue. Okay, so you have to listen to Dr. Akram. So I'm going to tell you actually at the end that you should not always listen to Dr. Akram. One of the things that are going to make you realize who you're really meant to be is to challenge Dr. Akram and to ask him, to challenge him, to justify to you why I should be a Muslim and what it entails and what it means to be a Muslim. Why I should follow this book. What makes it different and unique and better and suitable for me and fitting for me and for my lifestyle? Why should I do the things as a Muslim as expected of me as a Muslim? Why should I do these things? You should challenge Dr. Akram and ask him these questions. You should not take what he says for granted. يختلف معك الدكتور, it's okay. They have to differ with him and tell him, I'm not convinced, I don't understand. I want you to explain this to me in the Quran, what it means to be a Muslim woman and what it means to be, a Muslim youth, and what it means to be, why I cannot do some of the things that, and why should I do some other things, and I should be in the company of other things. But let me move forward and I'll tell you another idea that I think is very important. That every person in this life has this idea and has this calling, and it comes from this very soul of ours. And there's so many different ideas in the Quran and different concepts in the Quran, and everyone has a mission to accomplish. And Quran speaks to this regard. Let me give you some examples from the Quran. But I want to tell you two things really quick, just to answer what I started with, the questions, who you really are. I want to be fair to you and tell you that it is okay to have different answers based on the context. Psychologists in general, Erik Erikson, if you want to look him up, those are in college, look him up and see he has like a whole thesis. He's very, very accomplished in terms of psychology and defining like social spheres and stuff like that. Social spheres meaning the context. You're a Muslim inside the masjid, you're a Muslim outside the masjid, but you don't necessarily, identify yourself only as a Muslim, because if you're in school, you are student first and foremost. Yes or no? And if you're at home, you are a kid or a child or whatever, siblings and so on and so forth. So what I mean to say is this, that identity is not a fixed concept. It's not something that is, fixed and does not change. It's a fluid concept, and it develops, it matures, it changes based on your different experiences in life and so on. But what's important that it's defined by the social sphere. Having said that, there is, he says, Erik Erikson, he says that there is a dominant identity. There are subservient identities, but there is a dominant one. The dominant one for us as Muslims should be our Muslim identity. And what does that mean? I want to give you some examples. But it's very important to understand this, that I'm not being a hypocrite. I'm not being not for real. I'm not, not keeping it real. I'm not, being the person that I pretend to be here and different than I'm outside or whatever. I'm just pretty much dealing with the social sphere. When I'm at work, I don't necessarily talk about, Quran and Hadith like I do in the masjid, but I'm influenced by that. I'm guided by that. These ideas are in my mind. Why is that the case? Because my dominant identity is to be a Muslim. That is my source of guidance, my source of foundational principles, my source of, understanding, my source of, information, my source of what is right and what is wrong. So yes, there are subservient identities, and it's okay to wear the different hats, it's okay to do this and that, but it's very important to understand that above all, there is a dominant personality. That if you truly embrace, not only that you are going to complete all these subservient identities and you're going to do justice to each one of them, but you are going to not betray that dominant identity. You're going to stay true to your roots. You're going to stay for real to what you've been like saying and walking the walk, not just talking the talk. It's important to realize this idea because many of us tend to be very confused when we leave these comfort zones. This is a comfort zone, yes or no? We all Muslims, we all the same thing. We all like pretty much look alike, not necessarily in terms of like features, you know, but we all look alike in terms of what we believe in, how we behave, our level of expectations. I expect the sisters to be sitting on one side, I expect the brothers to be sitting, you know what I mean? So it's important to understand that this is a comfort zone. The challenge is, are we going to stay true to the things that we deem to be right and good and fulfilling? If we leave this and we go outside, are we going to hold the same values, the same ideals, the same principles? That is the challenge that all of us, including Dr. Akram, each one has to face this challenge, and most importantly, has to answer one day whether or not he had ikhlas enough, he had sincerity enough to answer this outside the comfort zone. It's very nice in the MSA to say, yes, we're Muslims and this and that, yes or no? But it's far more difficult when you're sitting in a classroom in the summer and there is a girl who's sitting in front of you and you have to lower your gaze, yes or no? Because that's what is expected as a Muslim. That's what's expected of you to do. It's very important not to talk to this guy because it's not befitting for you as a Muslim girl to do something behind the backs of your parents, behind everything that you were told, after all the sacrifice and everything they have done for you, after everything they have taught you about Allah and what Allah has, the trust that has placed with you and everything. It's not okay to go to the mall and to do this and to do that and to do most of the things that people take for granted. Every other girl does, yes or no? That is the idea, that is the challenge. Can I be true to the things that I hold to be good and fulfilling and righteous and right and so on and so forth? That is the challenge. Let me give you some examples, and I think I have another 5 minutes.
5 and the 5.
5 and 5, okay. I could go for a little more, inshallah, but I'll try to summarize because I want to give a chance to look for Akram, and then we're going to take questions and translate for him and stuff. I love for you guys to interrupt. I love for you guys to, ask questions. And, if this thing is like interactive, if you even challenge me, tell me, listen, I want to challenge you about this point because you say it's easy or whatever, it's hard. And I might agree with you. I think it's hard, but maybe it's worth it. It's hard, but it's worth it. Well, let's find out. So, let me give you some examples. We agreed so far that, this identity is a fluid thing and it's defined by social spheres. And, as difficult as that sounds, but I give you some examples and I expect you, inshallah, to follow. At this point, let me give you a couple more ideas and then I'll move to examples. This time is far more challenging, and this is what I was just saying, Walid, yes or no? It is very challenging. Why? Because you are just part of so many cliques, so many circles, so many contexts, so many different things. Asina O'Neill, look her up, Asina O'Neill, in Sydney, Australia. Asina O'Neill, after having 500,000 followers on Facebook, 300,000 followers on YouTube, and I don't know how many on Snapchat and everything else, right? She pretty much got tired. And she said, you know what? I have to pretend to be happy. I have to live up to the expectations of my fan base. I have to make sure that I'm always excited. My videos have to be like top notch. I have to make sure that I play to their likes. I have to make sure that, I meet their expectations and so on. And she said, I'm tired of it all. I really don't care what my fans think. I really don't care how many more likes I'm going to get on a post. I really don't care about all these things anymore. I'm tired. I'm really exhausted. I cannot continue with this lifestyle. I lost who I really am. I don't know who I am. I became a different person, and it's difficult for me. And this is exactly what I mean. You have, you more than any other time in the past. If we had when we first got cell phones, my days were oh my God, that's the coolest thing ever. But you guys, now you have to, it's unbelievable. You're not there are no boundaries in terms of geographic boundaries. You can talk to a guy in Paris tonight. You can talk to a girl in whatever, in South Africa, to anything like that. There are generic boundaries. You can talk to people from all different cultures. You can talk to people from all different backgrounds, languages. You can Google Translate. I bet you I can tell you a whole bunch of stuff in Spanish just on top of my head if I'm typing, because I'm going to put it in Google Translate, yes or no? And so on and so forth. So this time is difficult, but also it's exciting because it gives us opportunities. And with this, I wanted to tell you that the expectation is bigger, and the expectation is maybe more serious, because more than any other time in the past, you guys, the second generation of Muslims in North America, are expected to do some great things. If you live your life just to go to school and to be an average, teenager, and to do the thing that everybody else does, what justifies the sacrifice of your parents, that they've done everything above and beyond to give you this kind of life. What justifies how hard they have worked? What justifies, all the boundaries that they have to overcome and all the difficulties that they have to overcome and so on? What justifies you being different from everybody else if you're not going to be better than anybody else? That is the idea. You have to challenge, because you have means at your disposal, yes or no? We didn't have any of the things that you guys have. Like with this thing right here, you can talk to the world with a smartphone. This thing is the miracle of the 21st century. You can talk to the world, you can learn, you can go to school, you can do a million things on your phone. So what's expected of you, given the kind of tradition, given the kind of message, given the kind of responsibility that is placed with you, is nothing but great things. So we should not settle for an average teenager that plays 6 hours, on Fortnite, that does Fortnite. I got your attention? Fortnite, I hate that game, man. You guys on Fortnite at least 3 hours or whatever. Weekend, you guys are living on this thing. Are you kidding me? This is who you really are. You're going to be a Fortnite expert. This is your calling in life. Because people who came before you, many years, they had nothing. They had very, very little, if nothing, compared to what you have. They've done great things. They were great people. Let me give you examples, and I close it inshallah 5 minutes.
10 to 5 minutes.
Okay. So let me give you some examples, inshallah. So let me give you examples from the Quran. I'll put this stuff. Here you go. I give you some examples that I personally, I'm excited about. Okay? I like examples from Quran and examples from the life. This guy. Listen, you guys are a bunch of slackers, man. The sheikh is tired of you. All you do is just slack, relaxing, you're not interacting, no dinner for these guys. So let's make it a little interactive. Any example from the Quran about identity? Let's take one good example and one bad example. One positive, one negative. From the Quran. And we'll take one also from, one from tradition, one from, the life of the Sahaba or something like that. You guys like stories. I told you a couple of stories. I'll tell you one more story, inshallah. But let's take some examples. Yes, from the Quran, takers. Yes, we're going to put some money here on the table. We'll do a Sunday thing. Sunday soup thing. Put $10 on the table. And Sheikh, you're going to put some money on the table. We'll put some, for those who are going to answer. And here you go. Abu Hakim has some money. Here you go. No. It's from me. Yes, one from the Quran. We do a Sunday school thing. If you answer, you get something. Someone who's confused about their identity. Someone who's confused about their identity. In the Quran, yes. Any takers? Someone who's really confused about their identity in the Quran. And someone who's not. Yes. Yes, about who?
The deceivers.
Yes, the munafiqun, correct. So those who are pretend to be something that they are really not. They have the severest punishment, because who are they kidding? Who are they kidding? They are not there to say that they're kidding Allah, because Allah knows. They're kidding the people, and one day, Allah is going to reveal things about them, or one day, their true nature will be revealed. Okay, but I want an example, not a group of people, a person. Anybody goes to Sunday school? Something from the Quran. Yes. Yes, these are wonderful ayat. Yes, let not be one group of people, make fun of another group of people. Somebody in the Quran who's confused about their identity. In Surah Al-Baqarah, there is, before anything was created, there was one guy confused about their identity. He was jealous. Yes, who? Iblis, exactly. So we'll start with Iblis. In Surah Al-Baqarah, amongst other surahs, you have to know Iblis. Who's Iblis? Satan. Satan was just like pretty much, in the Bible and the Torah and the Quran and even like folk tales and Chinese and everything else, there is like an evil guy, there is a bad guy. And this guy was confused about his identity because he thought he is better than others, particularly Adam, because of the substance out of which he was made, he was created. Another person who was confused about their identity is in the Quran, in Surah Al-Anbiya. Very, very important guy that got lost in the whole society by the name of Qarun. Qarun was a very interesting idea. Qarun was given like amazing things and all treasures and everything else, yes? But Allah says Qarun is from the people of Musa. Yes? إِنَّ قَارُونَ كَانَ مِنْ قَوْمِ مُوسَى. فَبَغَى عَلَيْهِمْ. Exactly. So Qarun was from the people of Musa. Was he acting like the people of Musa? Was he supporting the people of Musa, the Israelites? Was he helping them, the slaves? What did he do? What did he do? Yes.
He made money, and then after he made money, people asked him for money, and no, people asked him that where he got the money. He said he got it from his team.
Exactly, his own self, because he's smart, he's this, he's that. Here's one guy who's very confused about his identity. He got lost in the whole society, the pharaohs and the clan of the pharaoh and stuff like that. He forgot who he really is. Let alone that he forgot who he really is. He started he started transgressing, he started wronging his own people. And we see examples like this. We know the self-hating Muslims, we know they do exist. And they be like, the Muslims are this and that and stuff. But you yourself, that is your identity. Well, that's what I used to be. Okay, if you're not even a Muslim, wouldn't it be good enough to be just, to be fair to others? Instead of fabricating lies. The biggest industry, one of the biggest industries in America, in the West, is Islamophobia. You know how much money you get paid if you get on a microphone, or if you go to a TV channel or something like that, and you speak crap about Islam, and you say, oh, they this, barbaric this, terrorist this, and all that stuff. You become rich. You do. And that is the kind of people, and some of them they know a thing or two about Islam, subhanAllah. And you have examples like that. Let's take one example of a person who's crystal clear. A person who affirmed his Muslim identity. A person who was proud of his Muslim identity. A person who was really not confused about his identity. And the very first thing that came out of his mouth, he says, Inni Abdullah, atani al-kitab. I am the slave of Allah. I am no master. I'm not confused. I was created because there is something that created me. There is an entity. There is a bigger entity. There's a calling for me to fulfill that entity that the Creator told me to fulfill. I am the slave of Allah. Inni Abdullah, atani al-kitab. This is who I am, and this is what I do. I was given the book, and I am a prophet. The two most existential questions, the important questions that every single human being has to answer for themselves. Who am I, and what am I here to do? What's my contribution to this life? What's my calling? What's my purpose? How am I going to change things? How I can live in the legacy of those who came before me, or at least fulfill the legacy of those who came before me. We stand on the shoulders of giants. The people, the very people who built this building that you're in, the people who donate, who give out of their own money, that out of their sweat and their work, that they work very hard. The people who came, they might not be famous, but they were great people because they lived for a cause and they lived for a purpose. They lived life for a cause and they lived life on purpose. That's what makes great people. I'll conclude with this. I'll stop here. I'll give you one more example, inshallah, but I'll stop here, and if there's time, I'll share it with you. Who is it that I was talking about in the Quran?
Wait, what's the question?
The one that I was just talking about in the Quran, yes. Isa alayhi salam. Okay, so, you know, Isa, not the guy on the cross, you know, the church down the block outside. That's not the guy I'm talking about. I'm talking about Isa, the prophet of Allah. He was a great man. You should know his legacy and what he did and how he changed his people. And that was the very first thing that came out of his mouth. The affirmation of who he really is. Can we maybe challenge ourselves to live, you know, a life like this, a life worth living? That is the idea. There's a number of other examples that maybe if there's time, inshallah, I'll share with you, but I'll stop here. I'm giving, inshallah, to my teacher a chance, Dr. Akram. Jazakallah.
انت ما سالتش 5 دقائق كمان 5 دقائق بدون سؤال.
أسئلة؟
لا انت لو في عناصر حابب تتكلم فيها كمان 5 دقائق.
I was hoping maybe I can share with you one more example, and if you give me an example, that would be great. Yes. Who is it that you are excited about, or somebody that you think they have affirmed their identity, or whatever comes to your mind? I'm happy that you raised your hand. These guys, go ahead. Ahl al-Kahf. So Ahl al-Kahf is really a great example. Wow, you are smart, mashallah. So Ahl al-Kahf is it's a group of people, right? 5, 6, how many in the Quran? It doesn't exactly specify, but a small group of people, yes or no? They dared to challenge society. They dared to challenge this whole collective mind. You know, society spends money, society in the collective sense. The people in charge of society. Who's in charge of society? Politicians, corporations, businessmen, very affluent. Trump is one of them. What was Trump? Businessman.
Presidents.
So, but that's the idea. Those are the guys who are in charge of society. They have a vested interest to make you define who you are according to their terms, according to what is going to be good for their business, according to what is going to give them that vote that takes into the Congress, according to what is going to benefit their whatever, military machine, their this, their that, their colonist ideas, all sorts of things. As small, as big as that sounds, as small as that sounds. Sometimes society invests a lot of money to make you define who you are, aside from who you really want to be. Because society dictates that you look a certain way. And it's not always welcome if you look differently. Society dictates that you should have, you know, as much money in your pocket and spend on this and that and have that kind of thing and that kind of thing. But that necessarily not what you like. But society imposes some of these things on you. On the subway coming from New York City, every guy who's sitting across from me on the W line, the yellow line, they have both their jeans ripped, because that's what society told them. You know, fashion says you have to get a scissor and do that. Dude, if it's cold and it's like in the middle of like December, and I don't care what fashion dictates about that, but society does that. So yes, it's a powerful thing, but if you have the conviction, if you have the understanding, if you have the grounding, if you yourself could stand up for some of the ideas that you deem to be right and to be justifiable and to be good, maybe you, the individual, is going to change the collective mindset of society. Has this ever happened before? Ahl al-Kahf are an example of that. The people of the cave. It's one example. There was one person 1400 years ago, a lone man in the vast desert, was able to change the collective mindset of the whole Arabian Peninsula, let alone the world, in less than 23 years. Is it doable? Yes, it's doable. But it takes conviction, sacrifice, understanding, grounding, refinement, tarbiyah. It takes all these different things. Let me leave you with this example. 7 years after the passing of the Prophet ﷺ, a great man came to be recorded in the books of history. What makes him great is his teacher. The messenger told this man 7 years after he died, and he told him something that trickled down all the way to the lowest rank of the army. What do I mean by that? There is a person by the name of Rubai ibn Amr. Ever heard the name Rubai? Rubai ibn Amr is a very celebrated sort of figure in the biography of the messenger, in the seerah. Rabai is a very interesting guy because he comes, you know, they're facing off with the Persians. It's a great empire, you know, like two big armies. They definitely a much smaller army, and the Persians are coming with all sorts of military hardware, the equivalent of like, you know, the F-16s and everything that you can see right now. And it's a very intimidating scene. It is intimidating. Dude, if I see on the 21st Street like a bunch of kids and they all like late at night and they look scary or whatever, I'm gonna be intimidated. I'm gonna cross the other side. We're talking about an army of like, you know, very intimidating size and figure and everything like that. So Rabi' ibn Amr was asked to be the messenger of the Muslim army and to pretty much justify, to say who they are and what they are here to do. Following? So he was asked by the Persian army, this much bigger army, hey, why you guys came from the desert and what do you want? So he was sent by the Muslims to answer these two questions. So he says something extremely profound. He says, we are a people that Allah, not any human being, that the creator of heavens and earth commissioned us, me, to deliver people from the injustices of all these different ideologies and all these different systems and so on, to the justice of our tradition. Look how proud, how grounded, how convincing this man is. And Allah has commissioned us to take people from the narrowness, you know, everything is like, you know, small. You leave from this small place to go to your small apartment, to sit in a small car, to go to the small classroom, from the narrowness of this life, you know, to the vastness, to the great plains of not only this life, but the hereafter. It's not something in the unseen. You're going to experience this here if you follow this tradition. نحن قوم بعثنا الله لنخرج العباد من عبادة العباد لعبادة رب العباد ومن جور الأديان إلى عدل الإسلام ومن ضيق الدنيا إلى سعة الدنيا والآخرة. What an amazing speech! Who is this guy? A foot soldier. The greatness of Islam, that it was able to convey this message many years after the person, the prophet who called people to Islam died. The message didn't die with him. That's what makes you a great person. If your calling, if your message, if what you worked and lived for stays after your short, limited life. Because a few years from today, many of us are going to be 6 feet under. Many of us are going to be underground. We are no longer going to have a name. We're no longer going to be mentioned. We're no longer to be given an introduction on a mic. No longer going to be any of these things. No longer going to be the PhDs or any of these things. A smart person not only works for this life, but also for the hereafter. So that's what made him great. The second reason why he was great, that it was amazing that this greatness of Islam, the message of Islam, that it was able to deliver the message not only to the commanders of the army, not only to the companions of the Prophet, not only to the followers of the companion, not only to the ranking officers, those who are in charge of battalions. You know, the Muslim army has like battalions and they have like chiefs of battalions and stuff like that. Who is this guy again? A foot soldier. How could this guy on the very basic level of on the ground understand such an amazing, insightful, intelligent understanding? How could he conclude this on his own and give this amazing speech? Because his message is great, and what he lived for was great, and what he was ready to give up his life for was equally great. So I hope that you guys hopefully look up to some of these examples, and not to be, oh my God, the phones and this and the other thing. Please try to define a greater meaning for your existence, because you are not only physical beings of flesh and blood, you are souls that should race to that which is good, to that which is amazing, to that which is great. So inshallah, I'll stop here and 5 minutes.
دي لصق نفتح الأسئلة.
So, Dr. Akram is going to speak, and I'll give you some translation, inshallah, after he's done.
أنا هتكلم دول استاذنكم في الكلام ده. بس استاذ مصطفى استاذنك بس الأولاد. لا أنا هخافش، أنا هجيب عنك بس الصوت اللي بره بس. السلام عليكم. السلام. أنا حاسس بس إن الصوت عامل صدى صوت، وأنا بطبيعة صوتي عالي شوية. أستاذ شريف يعني صوته بسم الله ما شاء الله حنين كده نايس فيري نايس. هترجم دي؟ يس. يعني صوته جميل. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله وأزكى صلوات الله وتسليماته على سيدنا ومولانا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أزواجه أمهات المؤمنين ثم أما بعد. خلي كل حاجة زي ما هي. دي حركة مقصودة. النهارده إيه؟ الأول قبل ما أبدأ اللي اللغة العربية عندهم يعني كده تعبانة شوية. كم واحد أو كم واحدة؟
We will translate. If you don't understand, just bear with
لا أنا عايز بس أعرف تقريبا كم واحد ما بيفهمش لغة عربية. أدي واحد. بس أنت أحمد يعني شوية مش كده؟ طيب أدي واحد. حد تاني؟
Who doesn't understand Arabic? Yeah, raise your hand.
عرفات وهاشم وأحمد. طيب خلاص تعال لطيف. أدي أربعة. أنا عارف هنا في الفتيات. تقريبا كم؟ دونت سبيك الله يخليك. طب في بناتنا كل الحمد لله بيفهم؟ طب الحمد لله رب العالمين. ازيك يا بنت محمد يوسف؟ أنا أسأل سؤال ومحتاج تكون الإجابة فيه سريعة وصريحة. النهارده الجمعة مش كده؟ احنا في سنة كام؟ هجري.
1400 وحاجة.
اللي عارف يرفع ايده بس ما حدش يجاوب. اللي عارف يرفع ايده. النهارده احنا في سنة كام؟ 1400 حاجة. اللي عارف يرفع ايده. ادي واحد. احنا في سنة كام؟ ما حدش يجاوب. 2 3 4 سنة كام؟ انا بكون 5. ده انا اعتقد لو قلت النهارده كام شعبان هتبقى شيء صادق. النهارده كام شعبان؟
7.
6 ولا 7؟
7.
كويس. احنا في سنة 1440 من الهجرة النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. النهارده في شهر شعبان و7 شعبان. أستاذ شريف كان بيتكلم الآن دلوقتي عن الهوية الإسلامية. مش هندخل في التفصيلات في هذا الموضوع، وإن كان هو موضوع مهم جدا للغاية. بس لما أبقى أنا بقول إن أنا مسلم صاحب دين ولا أعلم في أي عام أعيش، يبقى الهوية بتاعتنا راح فين؟ بعيدة خالص. أحيانا في بعض الأشهر ممكن إحنا الآن دلوقتي نقول شعبان علشان عندنا بعد شهر إيه؟ رمضان. فإحنا شعبان وبعد منه رمضان وذي الحجة دي الأشهر وشوال عشان العيد جاي وكل سنة وأنتم طيبين. بيبقى سهل جدا إحنا عارفين الشهر ده شهر إيه. لكن أحيانا بيجي علينا محرم وصفر وجمادى أولى وثانية وثالث ورابع وهكذا، بتبقى الناس تايهة مش عارفة. وأنا أقول بكل صراحة لو سألنا أي واحد عن أشهر السنة الميلادية هيعد من أول يناير لحد ديسمبر. ولو سألت الآن أول شهر في السنة الهجرية هو إيه؟ محرم. حلو. وآخر شهر والله ممتاز. اللي يعد ال 12 ال 12 يبقى ممتاز. ده كله منتظر فلوس. لا جدد النية. اللي يعد ال 12 ال 12. طيب احنا هنعمل عندنا مسابقه بعد ما نخلص مع الشباب والاخوات يعملوا مسابقه في ال 12 دول. لكن انا بقول بكل صراحه الكلام اللي ختم بيه اخونا الاستاذ شريف في الحديث عن ربيع بن عامر رضي الله عنه وارضاه، وهو شخصيه من اروع الشخصيات التي سجلت وحفرت لها مكانا في التاريخ، بجمله صغيره قوي اللي هو ختم بيه وقال فيها: نحن قوم اعزنا الله بالاسلام. انتم مين؟ قال له: ان الله ابتعثنا ابتعثنا لنخرج من شاء من عبادة العباد إلى عبادة رب العباد، ومن جور الأديان إلى عدل وسماحة الإسلام، ومن ضيق الدنيا إلى سعة الدنيا والآخرة. ده واحد بيعتز بنفسه. ولذلك لما نيجي نتكلم عن الهوية، الهوية المقصود بها إيه؟ الهوية هي ما يميز شخصية الإنسان. كل إنسان له هوية خاصة، له هوية خاصة. فلان تختلف شخصيته اللي هي هويته عن هوية فلان، وفلانة تختلف شخصيتها وهويتها عن فلان. المسلم في حد ذاته لابد إن هو يكون له شخصية مميزة ومميزة. ولذلك في شهر شعبان يوم 15 شعبان سنة 2 من هجرة النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام، 15 شعبان حصل حاجة مهمة كده، اللي هي 15 شعبان سنة 2 من الهجرة في حدث مهم. اللي يقولوا
حاجة من اللي كانت مكتوبة على البورد في المسجد.
لا، اللي يقولوا له جايزة. ها؟ رضا ساجد؟ الإسراء والمعراج ده أنت تدفع $100. سنة 2 هجرية، 2 هجرية في حدث مهم، حاجة كده الله يسامحها بدر، الله يسامحها. في حدث مهم مرتبط برضه بالإسراء والمعراج، مرتبط بالصلاة بتاعتنا، تغيير القبلة. الله يبارك فيك في المسجد بس الآن. هو في حاجة عندكم كده؟ لا، ترجمة يترجموها في الآخر. في حادث تحويل القبلة، تحويل القبلة، لأن الله جل وعلا أراد أن الإنسان المسلم يكون له شخصية مميزة حتى في عبادته. في العبادة بتاعته الناس بتصلي للمشرق، ابتدأنا نصلي في نفس الجهة إلى بيت المقدس، لكن شاء الله جل وعلا أن تتحول القبلة وبدأنا نصلي إلى البيت الحرام. وأنزل الله جل وعلا قوله في سورة البقرة: قد نرى تقلب وجهك في السماء فلنولينك قبلة ترضاه. وقبلها بثلاث 4 آيات قال الله جل وعلا أول الجزء رقم 2: سيقول السفهاء من الناس ما ولاهم عن قبلتهم التي كانوا عليها قل لله المشرق والمغرب يهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. يبقى الهوية الشيء اللي بيميزني عن غيري. أنا كمسلم ليا ما يميزني عن غيري أيضا. السؤال المهم: متى بدأت الهوية الإسلامية؟ وقتين إحنا بقت لنا هوية. شاب بعض بيعمل كده، مش عارف هو ده سوء إجابة ولا وليد. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي. دي نزلت بالضبط يوم 9 من شهر ذي الحجة، يوم جمعة سنة 10 من هجرة النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. يعني عايز تقول لي إن الصحابة ما كانش لهم هوية لحد يوم الجمعة 9 ذي الحجة سنة 10؟ يعني 10 سنوات في المدينة و13 سنة في مكة، يعني 23 سنة، وفاضل حوالي كام و70 يوم لسه ما كانش فيه هوية للمسلمين. ايه رأيك في الإجابة دي؟ تنفع الإجابة دي؟ لا، اللي هيقول لي لا يقول لي لا ليه؟ مين اللي قال لا؟
I'm defending my point.
عايز دافع عن النقطة بتاعتك. قول.
If they, I'll speak in English because my Arabic isn't as good. If they had an identity, it wasn't a complete identity, because you cannot say that the identity they had before this day that the ayah came down was a complete identity, because Allah Azza wa Jalla wouldn't have say I finished your deen.
أنا ما قلتلكش متى اكتملت، أنا قلت لك متى بدأت.
متى بدأت.
أنا قلت لك بقى عن ما أنا عارف. نص الآية يقول اليوم أكملت. أنا يعني سعيد. أنا عايز كده اللي عنده فكرة يدافع عنها. ممتاز. والله يا ابني تستاهل دي. مهم جدا انك تدافع، ده مهم. لكن انا ما سالتكش اخي الحبيب مننا وليد، ما سالتكش متى اكتملت. لا، انا بقول لك متى بدات. متى بدات؟ حد هنا؟ طب حد هنا؟ ها؟ متى بدات الهويه؟ اتفضل وجدي. الجهر بالدعوه. يعني عايز تقول لي بقى الجهر بالدعوه ده بعد كام سنه؟ بعد 3 سنوات. فاصدع بما تؤمر واعرض عن المشركين، وربنا قال له وانذر عشيرتك الاقربين. لا، عايز تقول لي بعد 3 سنوات بدات يبقى فيها هويه اسلاميه؟ ها؟ ده انا قربت خلص اهو. ما شاء الله عبد الله.
من بداية كلمة اقرأ.
الله اكبر، والله انت ممتاز يا ابني. هي من بدايه كلمه اقرا بدات الهويه الاسلاميه. من البدايه اقرا. هو في شوف ربنا بيقول له ايه؟ قال له 5 ايات مش كده؟ قال له اقرا باسم ربك الذي خلق، خلق الانسان من علق، اقرا وربك الاكرم الذي علم بالقلم، علم الانسان ما لم يعلم. القراءه هنا قراءه مطلقه ولا اسمها قراءه ايه؟ اقرا. ها؟ اقرا ايه؟ باسم ربك. يبقى مش اي قراءه. من هذا الرب؟ الرب الذي خلق، الرب الذي خلق، خلق الانسان من علق، اقرا وربك الاكرم الذي علم بالقلم، علم الانسان ما لم يعلم. يبقى الهويه الاسلاميه بدات ساعه ما جه جبريل ومسك النبي عليه الصلاه والسلام وغطه اي ضمه، خده كده اليه الى صدره وقال له اقرا، قال له ما انا بقارئ. خدوا الثانيه اقرا، قال له ما انا بقارئ. الثالثه قال له اقرا باسم ربك الذي خلق، خلق الانسان من علق، ونزلت هذه الايات. يبقى دي الهويه الاسلاميه. طيب معاك كمان 5 دقايق؟
طيب
انا اديتك كتير. الله يبارك فيك. انا كنت سعيد جدا بكلام اخوي الاستاذ شريف، وهنفتح حوار ثاني ان شاء الله عز وجل. لكن في 4 مكونات تتكون منها الهويه. 4 مكونات اساسيه لازما عشان يبقى احنا بنقول في هويه. 4 مكونات اساسيه. 1 عقيده وعباده. عشان انا انتمي الى الهويه الاسلاميه 1 يبقى عندي عقيده وعباده. 2 لغه وثقافه. 3 تاريخ وحضاره. 4 اخلاق وسلوك. حد يعرف يقولهم تاني؟ هم خلي بالكم 4 في 2 ب8. اقولهم تاني. 1 عقيده وعباده. 2 لغه وثقافه. 3 تاريخ وحضاره. 4 سلوك واخلاق او اخلاق وسلوك. ان ما كانش انا عندي ال4 دول ماسك فيهم بايديا واسناني، ما اعرفش اخونا شريف يترجمها زي دي، ماسك فيهم؟ طيب ماسك فيهم بايديا واسناني، يبقى انا بالنسبه لي في خلل قائم. لكن انا عند العقيده والعباده هتوافقوني، وعند الثقافه، عند التاريخ والحضاره هتوافقوني، وعند الاخلاق والسلوك هتوافقوني. لكن عند الثقافه والايه؟ واللغه. هي واحد تقول لي اللغه اكسكيوز مي، انا ما قلتلكش ما تتكلمش انجليزي، لكن لا يمنع وانت بتتكلم انجليزي يبقى عندك اعتزاز باللغه العربيه، لان هي لغه الايه؟ لغه القران. انا انزلناه قرانا مترجما ولا عربيا؟ عربيا. يبقى عربي. يبقى السند براسه ساجد. هذا ساجد ده يعني ادي واحد باكستاني مولود في باكستان. انا يعني اتعجب، عايز تتعلم اللغه العربيه ليه؟ لانه عايز يفهم قرانه صح، عايز يفهم دينه صح، عايز يتشبث بهوته صح. طب ممكن اخد الكلام ده بالانجليزي؟ خده، لكن في النهايه ايه المانع ان يبقى معاك ده ومعاك ده؟ واحد يقول انت لسه جاي جديد، خلي بالك لسه يعني كده انت لسه سخن. لا، ما احنا عايزين الاثنين ماشيين مع بعض. الجانب اللغه اللي هي لغه البلد اللي انت عايش فيها خليها موجوده معاك، لكن لغه القران اوعى تنساها. يعني بالله عليك اما يجي واحد يمسك مصحف كده ويقول لي استاذ جامعي يمسك المصحف وثاني صفحه في المصحف على طول اسمها سوره الايه؟ ثاني صفحه سوره البقره مش كده؟ يوم قاعد مع واحد شيخ بيقرا فيقول له ألم زلك الكتب. يقول له أنت بتقرأ في إيه؟ قال له سورة البقرة، عايزك تفسرها لي. قال له فسر لك فيها إيه؟ اقرأ. قال له ألم زلك الكتب. ألم، قال له ما فيش ألم، ده هي ألف لام ميم، وذلك بقت عنده زلك، والكتاب بقت الكتب. ده واضح ان هو لم يقرأ قرآنا قط، ما مسكش المصحف ابدا. لو جبت واحد من الهند، من اخواننا بتوع الهند ولا اندونيسيا ولا باكستان ولا ماليزيا ولا الفلبين اللي هم لا علاقة لهم باللغة العربية، يقول لك لا الف لام، مش هيقول لك الف لام مين، ولا يقول ايه ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه. يبقى لا، احنا محتاجين الاربع عناصر دول احفظوهم كويس، ولازم يبقوا ماشيين معانا الاربعه عشان انا محافظ على الهويه بتاعتي. رقم واحد عقيدتي وعبادتي. في عقيده، في ايمان، ومع الايمان العقيده الموجوده في عباده تنمي هذه العقيده. ما ينفعش ابقى مسلم بالبطاقه، ما ينفعش ابقى مسلم من ابويا وامي مسلم وخلاص، لا، ده انا عايز ايمان راسخ، عايز عباده تقوي هذا الايمان. رقم 2 اللي هو لغه وثقافه، الثقافه العربيه. احنا الان دلوقتي الكل بيقرا تاريخ اوروبا وتاريخ امريكا. تعرف ايه عن تاريخ النبي عليه الصلاه والسلام؟ تعرف ايه عن تاريخ النبي؟ اما يجي واحد النهارده اما اسال واقول متى كانت تحويل القبله او حدث معين في سنه 2 ما اخبط فيك شويه بقى، ما انت قلت مدحت فيك، اخبط فيك في اليوم الثاني. وبعدين يقول ان الاسراء والمعراج بعد الهجره، لا 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 لا، ما ينفعش ما ينفعش. بسال واحد واقول له تعرف ايه عن النبي عليه الصلاه والسلام؟ انا اقول وبكل صراحه البعض من الاباء والامهات والاولاد لما تسالوا عن النبي معلوماته النبي محمد، امه امينه وابوه عبد الله، مات ما رآه، اتولد في مكه ومات في المدينه. دي الثقافه عند البعض. ايه تاني تعرفوا عن النبي؟ بالله عليكم مش البعض عنده كده؟ ما يعرفش حاجه عن النبي عليه الصلاه والسلام. يعني هو سيره النبي عليه الصلاه والسلام بقت في الحدوته والاغنيه بتاعت زمان اللي هي العيال كانوا بياخدوها في الحضانه. ده الكلام ده ثقافه طفل عنده 4 5 سنوات، يطبلوا له كده ويضحكوا له ويقولوا له امه اسمها امنه وابوه عبد الله مات نار. مش ده الواقع كان بتاع زمان. لكن ما ينفعش تكون دي الثقافه بتاعت شاب النهارده داخل الجامعه او فتاه على ابواب الجامعه او في الجامعه. يبقى احنا مقصرين في حق النبي عليه الصلاه والسلام. تعال النهارده اسال واحد تقول له كم رئيس في امريكا؟ كم رئيس في امريكا بالمناسبه؟
45.
45 لازم 5. خد بالك؟ هو عارف ان في 45. اخر واحد مين؟
مستر ترامب.
واول واحد مين؟ لا بأس، اعرف اللي انت ده كويس، لكن يبقى عيب عليا قوي ان انا ما اعرفش حاجه عن تاريخي، عن حضارتي. الحضاره بالمناسبه اللي احنا عندنا حاله من حالات الانهزام النفسي، الهزيمه النفسيه. هيترجمها دلوقتي الأستاذ شريف. تعرفين عليها هزيمة نفسية؟ إن أنا ما عنديش ثقة في نفسي، حاسس دايما وأبدا كده في حاجة نقصاني. إيه اللي ناقصك؟ إيه اللي ناقصك؟ ناقصك لا، مش ناقصني شيء. أنت راجل مواطن وعايش في المجتمع اللي أنت عايش فيه. زي ما أنت بتتعلم ثقافة المجتمع، اتعلم ثقافتك الدينية وثقافتك الإسلامية وثقافتك العربية، وتستطيع أن تجمع بين الاثنين وليس هناك أي نوع من أنواع التناقض. من الثقافة بالمناسبة الزي بتاعي إني، وخصوصا أما يكون الزي مرتبط بأمر ديني، بأمر تعبدي، زي الحجاب بالنسبة لبناتنا، بالنسبة للبنات دي ثقافة مش كده؟ وفي نفس الوقت ده دين، دي عبادة، هي ثقافة وعبادة. أنا لا يمنعني أن يكون ليس هناك من حرج أن يكون فتاة في هارفارد في أعرق الجامعات. هل ده يضاد أن يكون لابسة حجاب؟ هل الحجاب في حد ذاته في يوم من الأيام كان عائق عن التقدم العلمي؟ ياما شفنا أساتذة كبار من النساء في أعرق الجامعات سواء في العالم العربي أو في العالم الإسلامي. هل الحجاب قال لها ارجعي ورا خطوتين؟ هل قطعة القماش اللي على راسها خلتها تبقى متخلفة أو متأخرة أو ما بتخليهاش تذاكر كويس؟ لا، بسم الله ما شاء الله. وإحنا عندنا ياما كثير من النساء يعني أعطاهن الله جل وعلا من العقل ما لم يعطيه لغيره من الرجال. يبقى دي الثقافة ودي واللغة، الحضارة والتاريخ. آخر حاجة اللي هي الأخلاق والسلوك، إن يكون عندك أخلاق وسلوك أنت تنتمي بها وتعيش بها وتقدمها للناس. أنتوا عارفين أحيانا البعض بيتخيل إن عشان أكون داعي إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى لازم أكون بدقن وشيخ وبطلع على منبر وبصلي في المحراب. لا لا لا،
مفيش حاجة مني خالص. أنت تستطيعي أن تكوني، كل واحد منا يمكن يكون داعية الله جل وعلا دون أن يتكلم كلمة واحدة، كلمة واحدة. من أسبوعين 3 كانت أختي اتصلت عليا واتكلمنا من حوالي شهر. تعمل في مكان ما، في أثناء الحوار أثناء السؤال هي تعمل في العمل بتاعها في احتكاك بالجمهور ولابسه الحجاب بتاعها. جالها واحد سألها، تعامل معها بنوع من أنواع يعني حاسس كده ان في حاجه غريبه، انت في امريكا لابسه الحجاب ده ليه؟ بعد ما خلصت معاه وانتهى الموضوع وهي تعاملت معاه بطريقه مهذبه وجميله وراقيه، بدا يقول لها انا اسف انا غلطان. ليه خلتها؟ ايه اللي خلاه ان هو يتاسف لهذا الامر؟ جانب السلوك، جانب الاخلاق، حسن المعامله هي التي خلت هذا بنفس هذه الصوره. انتوا عارفين في رحله الطائف كانت سنة كام؟ كانت سنة 10 من بعثة النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. في واحد اسمه عداس أسلم على إيد النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. إيه كان سبب إسلامه؟ مين كان سبب إسلام عداس؟ إيه السبب؟ سمع كم محاضرة؟ حضر كم ندوة؟ دخل كم دورة؟ حد يقدر يقول لي أسلم إزاي عداس؟ ها؟ إيه السبب في إسلام عداس؟ كلمة واحدة بس. كلمة واحدة بس خلت عداس يدخل في الإسلام. قال ايه عداس؟ النبي عليه الصلاه والسلام جاب له قطف العنب ومسك العنب كده وقال بسم الله. يوم عداس يساله ويقول له بسم الله، يعني ما سمعت بهذه الكلمه من قبل في هذه البلاد. يوم النبي يقول له ومن اي البلاد انت؟ يقول له انا من نينوى. يوم النبي يقول له من بلد الصالح يونس بن متى؟ يقول له يقول له ما أدراك به فقد خرجت من البلاد وما يعلم به أحد. قال له هذا نبي وأنا نبي. فانكب عداس يقبل رأس النبي ويده وقدمه. السبب في الإسلام إيه؟ كلمة بسم الله. مش معنى الكلام ده بقى تطلع بكرة في الترين ولا في الباص بسم الله بسم الله الله أكبر هياخدوه. هتلاقي 3 4 بيضربوا فيك. لا، الكلام ده إمتى تستخدمها؟ إمتى وإزاي؟ إحنا عايزين ديت. أنا بقى أعتز أختم بنقطة بسيطة بس، وهي أنا عايش هنا في أمريكا وعايش في الغرب كله عموما. يعني هل هناك تعارض بين الهوية الإسلامية والوطن اللي أنا عايش فيه؟ أنت واحد ممكن يقول لي أو واحدة تقول لي أنت بتتكلم في شيء صعب، دي معادلة صعبة ما تركبش. أقول لك لا والله تركب وركبت قبل كده، وعلى رأي الجماعة بتوعنا يقول لك جربناها ومشيت. لا، الناس فعلا إيه المانع؟ إنك تبقى مسلم أمريكي، في مانع؟ يمشي ولا ما يمشيش؟ ما هو في نصراني أمريكي وفي يهودي أمريكي وفي هندوسي أمريكي. مفيش مانع إن أنا أكون عندي دي وعندي دي وأجمع بين الاثنين وأحطهم مع بعض وتمشي المعادلة. المهم إنك لا تخالف شرعك ولا تخالف القانون. تقدر تجمع بين الاثنين؟ أقدر أجمع بين الاثنين. وإذا ما قدرتش تجمع بين الاثنين يبقى ما ينفعش تقعد. لازم تجمع بقدر محاولة أن تجمع بين الأمرين في آن واحد. مسلم له دينه وشرعه، أمريكي له قوانين تحكمه وتضبطه. السؤال هنا، هل هناك قانون يجبر الإنسان أن يكفر؟ هل هناك قانون في هذه البلاد يجبر الإنسان أن هو يلحد؟ هل هناك قانون في هذه البلاد يجبر الإنسان أنه ما يصليش؟ هل هناك قانون في هذه البلاد يجبر الإنسان أو الفتاة أن هي تشيل حجابها؟ ربما تكون هناك بعض المضايقات وبعض البنات معذورات، بكل صراحة هناك قد تكون بعض يعني في بعض الضغوط، لكن في النهاية أستطيع إن أنا أجمع بين الاثنين في وقت واحد. وقد عاش الصحابة عليهم رضوان الله في الحبشة حوالي 15 سنة في الحبشة، وهي بلد غير إسلامية. لهم عاداتهم، تقاليدهم، ثوابتهم، هويتهم، ومدحهم الله جل وعلا على هذا الصنيع. أكتفي بهذا القدر وأسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يتقبل منا ومنكم وأن يغفر لنا ولكم. وصلي اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وجزاكم الله خير الجزاء.
So, I think you guys want to ask questions and stuff, so I could do this. I could summarize really in like 2-3 minutes really quick, but it would be great if maybe you can ask questions, if you could maybe make comments even or something like that, or try to tell us what you think so far. We've been talking, you guys haven't been saying much really, So I think it makes every sense to give you a chance to speak. So how does that sound? You guys go with that? Okay. So very quickly, so Sheikh Akram talked about, in like really 2-3 minutes, he talked about importance of realizing the time, right? You have to know what time it is, and you have to know where you are. And it's, as a Muslim, you need to be familiar with the Muslim calendar, not only just for the sake of familiarity, but you know, a number of things are dictated by the calendar in terms of like the fast, in terms of many, many things, right? So that's one thing that he said that's part and parcel of the identity. You need to be aware of these two things. And then he said the second year of Hijrah, something very important happened, and it really was the hallmark, some sort of like, you know, the milestone, if you will, when it comes to the identity, Muslim identity. What was that? The change of the Qibla, the prayer direction. Because it affirmed for the Muslims to have their own direction, their own Qibla, their own, you know, way of prayer and so on and so forth. So now they have, you know, become a distinguished nation from the rest of the people that they lived with, namely in Medina, the Jews and the Christians as well. So he talked about something very important. I think that's exactly what we should leave you with. When he started talking about the issue of identity, he says, I like to define identity in the sense, or I should say in the following 4 terms. 4 terms. And those are very important. I think it makes a lot of sense to me personally. So first he says that it should be based on conviction and worship. The Aqidah and Ibadah issue, conviction and worship. You know, it's very important that Sheikh Akram, Dr. Akram mentioned Surah Al-Baqarah, Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى الْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Those who believe in the unseen. Part and parcel of what we believe in is things that we cannot see, beyond what we could see. That is just it. That is part of what we are talking about, or what we are, you know, we should affirm in terms of our Muslim identity. So the issue of conviction and worship. These two things are very important.
الكلام ده على فكرة دي بس من الشرح إضافة من الأستاذ شريف.
So number 2, I'll be very brief. Language and culture, and that is obviously a very, very important, very vast, very large thing to define. The issue of culture is a big deal. But at least he talked about language, the importance of language, and need for us as Muslims to learn the language of our text, our book, of the revelation. And obviously it's very, very important, even for someone who's of not an Arab descent, even if someone who's of whatever. You know, Suhaib Webb is an amazing guy. You guys have to like go and check out his website. He memorized the whole Quran. Here's a white guy from Oklahoma. So if he could do it, you could do it. And then he says the issue of history and civilizational legacy, the legacy of us as Muslimin, our history, because you know it's a very important idea, the issue of history. This guy is actually is a Nobel Prize winner, and he he's a Russian celebrated guy. He's big in terms of literature, equal to Shakespeare in Russian, sort of. His name is Alex Stipens. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. This guy said something very important. If you want to destroy a people, sever their link to their history. Make sure, and that's what they did to African Americans. When in the whole, you know, cross-Atlantic trade slave or slave trade, the whole idea is to make sure that they forget everything in Africa. Make sure that they have nothing to do with their practices, their language, culture, everything. Because that's how you destroy them. So he says that it's very important to have links. You know, trees like, you know, shed like leaves and stuff, but they never like replace the roots. Yes or no? It's very important to be rooted in the ground and to know where you came from. That's an important idea. That's what this guy was saying. So finally, he says the issue of behavior and attitude. The issue of behavior. That's very, very important. That obviously you should carry yourself. We have a whole section in terms of like Islamic jurisprudence and stuff that talks about how you deal with people. Behavior. It's wonderful to have great ideas and to be, you know, smart and argue things and so on, but it's very important to obviously give life to that which you say, that you implement what you preach. So that's important. Finally, he says, you know, the issue of hijab is very, you know, challenging. You guys women in Islam, sisters, girls in Islam, obviously they have a bigger challenge than these guys. Goes without saying. Nobody could argue the contrary. You guys, by all means, have a much bigger challenge. These guys could fit in anytime if they want to, and even sometimes even if they don't want to. But it's very important for you guys, as the ones who carry the flag of Islam, is to understand that this is an empowering position. This is a very liberating sort of like concept and idea. That you are, in one way or another, you speak for everybody. You speak for the religion, you speak for the tradition, you speak for what Islam stands for, and so on. So your responsibility is very, very heavy and very serious. And as such, you should not see this as a limitation of any sort. To the contrary, Dr. Akram says, like some of the most amazing professors and intellectuals in the world, they wear hijab. And aside from that, piece of cloth should not define who you are, and anyone who says contrary of that is an ignorant person that maybe you could share some knowledge with. Okay, so let's finish with this. He gave a story of sister who's working and somebody was nasty to her, but then the way she carried herself, the person apologized. And then he says it's very important, we end with this, the issue of integration is very important, that you have no other choice. I tell you, because I lived the days of 9/11. I was in New York City, in Manhattan, on the day of 9/11 and day of 9/12. And I saw America change. I saw day and night, the change that took place. So why I say this, because I'm telling you that we have no choice but to integrate, but to embrace both identities, the American one and the Muslim one. And we have to figure it out all together. All of us have to come up with ways that does not, compromise who we are as Muslims. Because if we, buy, what makes people happy and so on at the expense of what Allah wants from us, we're not going to go far. It's very important to embrace both identities, and with this there are ways, and there's a whole different, line of discussion and so on. So I hope that you guys, would appreciate what Dr. Akram said, and I think you should, again, challenge him, and you push back on him, and ask him questions, and tell him, your side of the story. He's telling you his side of the story, and he's telling you, you need to, shape up, and you need to know Islamic history or whatever. You should tell him your side of the story as well. You should say how hard it is, and how challenging it is, and how hard you're trying, and what can you do, and that's how we're all gonna grow, inshallah. So, any ideas, any comments, any questions?
شكرا فندم، جزاك الله خير. هنبدا الان دلوقتي، الوقت هذا وقتكم انتم. هيبقى حوار الان دلوقتي عباره عن اسئله مفتوحه ان شاء الله جل وعلا. انا بشكر اخونا الاستاذ شريف جزاه الله كل خير على محاضرته اولا التي القاها، اثنين على ترجمته وعلى تطعيم الترجمه ببعض الاشياء الجميله. نسال الله جل وعلا ان يبارك فيه. هنبدا الان الاسئله، محتاجين على الاقل 5 اسئله من هنا و5 اسئله من هنا. هناخد سؤال ان شاء الله جل وعلا. نبدا ولا محدش من هنا رفع ايده خالص؟ سبحان الله. طيب انت كنت رافع ايدك من الاول، اتفضلي.
When you talk about subversive identity,
Yes.
you mentioned that social spheres can alter your dominant identity.
Correct.
But do you really take in consideration of the fact that where you spend your time mostly can alter your dominant identity, and so that it can also change your moral compass as a Muslim, and different social challenges in different environments can eventually change you and your purpose in life. So
Yeah.
what was your comment on that?
Couldn't agree more. So just by way of disclaiming that I'm no expert on the topic, whatever, I'm just doing independent research. I'm going to school for my thesis, for my PhD. So I have some sort of